Welcome to Across the Dietary Universe, a podcast where we bring experts along our voyage to discover the secrets of food and how it relates to each of our unique dietary profiles. From the origins of diets to current eating trends to the frontier of food innovation and the future of how we eat, we'll discover that when it comes to food, things are not necessarily as they seem. Honeycomb is a mobile app that works with your iPhone or Android device to help you find suitable food to eat at restaurants near you based on your specific dietary requirements. If you're plant-based and celiac, low FODMAP with a tree nut allergy, keto and dairy-free, we support countless dietary combinations and profiles. Based on your inputs, Honeycomb curates the best restaurants for you and the best options to order at those restaurants. If you have more severe allergies, don't worry. Honeycomb only recommends you places that have a clear protocol to deal with cross-contamination. Pre-order Honeycomb today at get.honeycomb.ai. Okay, Alyssa, it's so nice to have you on the Across the Dietary Universe podcast, and I love the glasses.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And yes, these are my blue blocking glasses, which I'm a big fan of. If you have yet to try them and you work on a computer all day, go get yourself a pair.
This is not an ad, ladies and gentlemen, but definitely get the glasses. And I just want to give a quick introduction here because there's going to be a lot to talk about. Alyssa and I actually know each other for a little while and have been friends. So it's going to be a nice, easy conversation today.
Amen.
Okay, so let's just get started here. Dr. Alyssa Kirby is a biochemist turned naturopathic doctor. Through her work in pharmacy, she saw how pills were used to treat everything. But diet and lifestyle were never questioned, eh? She then dedicated herself to discovering more about health and wellness and now helps patients heal through personalized nutrition, supplements, and therapies. Dr. Alyssa Kirby, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the podcast. How are we going to start today? Is that a good intro for you or what?
That was a perfect intro. I couldn't have said it better myself. And you nailed all the main points. I was a biochemist. I worked in the pharmaceutical world for a few, years in between, and then naturally, great word to use, find myself in naturopathic medicine.
You're gonna have to forgive me because I didn't know that you were a biochemist. Walk me through how did that happen? How did you end up tell me how you got into being a biochemist, why maybe you realized it wasn't for you, and then how you had that eureka moment. I just want the Dr. Alyssa Kirby story.
I love it. Okay, I'll fill you in a little bit. You know what? This takes me back to like my early 20s. At the time, I was really interested in pharmacy. It felt like we as a society, we took pills almost as blindly as we drank water, right? You have a headache, take an Advil. You have congestion, take a decongestant. It was just sort of so part of our daily lives, yet I felt like we knew nothing about it. I would have friends ask me questions like, I'm in pain, I took Advil, but I have a headache, can I take Tylenol? Like, can I mix it? Or, hey, you know what, I partied a lot last night. Is it better to take Tylenol or Advil? And I was like, wow, these are really interesting questions, most of which we're not told or educated. If you go to a physician to ask these questions, they're kind of gonna brush you off. I mean, let alone waiting to get an appointment with a physician. So biochemistry was sort of my way to fill this gap in what I saw between the general public and the pharmaceutical world. We take these pills almost blindly. We know nothing about them. Let me go study them. Let me go and study biochemistry and learn how they're made in labs. And are they really expired after 3 years? Or is that not true? All these sort of little things drove me crazy. And they drove me to study biochemistry. And I really wanted to work in the world of like pharmaceuticals and pharmacy. That was the dream. Whether it was to work in retail or in industry, I was like laser focused on becoming a pharmacist and bridging this gap and answering these questions and letting everyone know that, hey, there's more to these pills. Let me tell you why.
Honestly, if you stopped right there, I'd be like, yo, why aren't you a biochemist?
Exactly. And there was deep, I think also passion and curiosity, they really go hand in hand, right? Like when you're deeply curious about something, you could convey passion about it.
Right.
And so I did the whole biochemistry thing. I graduated. I worked in a lab. I
You
worked in the pharmaceutical
you were
world
very
for about.
curious. You're very curious, and then you just took a deep dive into that world. You worked in that world, and then somewhere along the way, the curiosity diminished.
I would say the curiosity shifted, right?
Okay.
Because the more you learn,
Right.
the more you're able to sort of understand
Okay.
and then ask different questions or deeper questions. And I think that's sort of what happened. I worked in a retail and hospital pharmacy, and I worked there for about 4 years. And I kept saying, like, wait a second, why are patients just numbers? They're not people. And how come we're only giving them these drugs? What about their lifestyle? What about their diets? What about their relationships with other people? I did a lot of research and audits in these sort of environments, and I kept coming back to the thought of, wait, it's just an algorithm, like it's just a flow chart. If patient presents with X blood, they get Y drug. If patient doesn't present with X drug, they get Y minus one drug. And I kept saying, like, but what about their diet? What about their lifestyle? Do they have friends? Is someone taking care of them? Are they lonely? Are they sad? Have they seen a therapist? It was like my brain, my mind was just, or maybe even my moral compass was just like, ask these questions. And I
Right.
kept asking. And it came to the point where my colleagues and my coworkers, pharmacists, were just like, what are you doing here? Like, you don't even like this. Like, go be a nutritionist, they would say to me. And
Right.
that offended me. Like, go,
You're asking too many questions.
like, really? So you don't ask these questions? You just, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. So you
Exactly.
didn't fit. You didn't fit with the sisterhood, with the brotherhood of don't ask anything, do your job,
Amen.
move on to the next number.
I came in there and I asked every question in the book and annoyed every single person there until they finally convinced me that this is not what I actually wanted to do with my life. And I ventured into the world of naturopathic medicine. And I felt like there I was encouraged to ask questions. And everything started to make sense. Oh, so they combine your physical symptoms with your mental and emotional symptoms and your lifestyle and your history, your medical history and your family history and your genetics. Yes, this makes sense.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And but how but why naturopathy? Because there's so many ways to so many other directions. Like if you're curious about asking questions, you could go any number of ways. So was there something maybe early on in your life that sort of nudged you in that direction that you knew, okay, well maybe this is to do with, the more natural approach, right? Why that direction? Because you can still ask questions in like, in other environments, for example.
You're absolutely correct. And that's true, right? Why not be an osteopath or a nutritionist or a dietitian? Or, I mean, there's so many other paths to have taken. In short, it might sound a bit, I don't know, I guess not woo, but for me, it was, I kind of had this aha moment. When I was studying biochemistry, there was like this girl in my class. She had like really cool short hair and a mohawk. And I was like, oh, she's different. She's cool. Like, I'm going to go be friends with her. And I was like, hey, I haven't seen you in any of my classes. Do you study here? Like, are you studying biochem? And she's like, no, I'm actually just taking this course. I'm trying to get into naturopathic medical school. And I remember being like, what is that?
Yeah, yeah,
And she showed me the website. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And it went into a drawer in my brain and away.
yeah.
And then fast forward 5 years later, I'm at this crossroads. I'm frustrated with the current healthcare system. I've been working in pharmacy for 4 years. I keep questioning. I'm like, well, what else should I do? Should I be a nutritionist? Should I not? And that box flew open. What was that thing again that girl studied that she mentioned like 5 years ago?
Wow.
And I looked it up and I felt like naturopathic medicine, for the layman person, naturopathic medicine is like, oh, like diet, or oh, like homeopathy. But really, it's this huge umbrella term that encapsulates everything that is not conventional. It encapsulates water as medicine, hydrotherapy. It covers massage therapy, touch as medicine. It covers nutrition as medicine, herbs as medicine, Chinese medicine, acupuncture. I mean, it's such a broad umbrella term that I
Mm,
felt like this was, it had a little bit more substance in its answers to health. And
right,
that's sort of what pursued it.
right. But it does bring with it, on the other side of that, the dual-edged sword of the risk when it's unconventional. It's against the convention. And so,
Bada bing.
so how did you reconcile with that? And look, by the way, this is I just want to make it clear for our listeners, right? A lot of times people will say science based. Let's take a second to understand what science is. Science, real science, the frontier of science, is looking at things that don't exist or things that people have theories on and testing them to see if they're legit or not, right? So by definition, you have to be trying things that are unconventional in order to then become the convention. So how else is it, how are we going to make it happen if we aren't testing things? And it makes sense if, there are people out there who are, leaning more towards the things that haven't necessarily been funded by big governments and corporations, because some things just don't have that cake behind it yet. Anyways, I digress.
I love it. And you said it so perfectly. I think I always, people like to glorify science, evidence-based medicine. I'm a scientist. All of this is incredible, right? I mean, I have a degree in biochemistry, a degree in medicine. I'm a huge, huge advocate and fan of the realm and world of science. But we tend to forget that, a few hundred years ago, science was a religion in the sense that the church ruled what could be explored within the world of science, right? People like Galileo, even, Isaac Newton. I mean, I'm only naming two big ones. There are many others. They were all rebels. They weren't scientists at the time. They went against what the church deemed was science. And as a result, they were outcasted. They were kicked out of society. Meanwhile, fast forward today, their theories and their hypotheses not only are now valued, but they're a legacy. And so you're absolutely right about that. Science involves you asking the very challenging questions that don't have obvious answers to them, and that usually do involve going in a completely different path than the mainstream. And so I think for me, growing up, I was always just a little bit different than all of my friends and all those around me. So I was used to doing something like, oh, where's Allie? She's, playing with sticks and worms over there. Like, what's she doing?
Yeah.
Like I was very used to that already.
Right.
So it wasn't foreign for me too. I think what I was very grateful for, and I hope all the listeners and those out there, you have your own moral compass. You've had experiences in your life where um, perhaps it's health related. Maybe oh, you know what? I ate pizza for 4 days straight. My depression came back. I really didn't feel good. I had IBS again, all these things. But I noticed that when I went on vacation and I was just eating all this food, wow, I felt great, right? It's your own personal
That's my
experience.
life.
And
How do you know my
yeah,
life?
oh yeah, we're gonna dive right into that as well. I need to know how
Yeah.
many pizzas we eat.
Yeah. Well, I repeat it on the podcast, and forgive me, listeners, for repeating this, but hey, I don't have a whole lot of stories yet. Let me live my life.
Live my
But
life.
but when I was in Italy, I could eat, like, look, I can't eat dairy. I have colitis, as our listeners know. So dairy is just not great for me. It's a trigger food. Also, alcohol, it causes inflammation and so on. And even red meats and things like that will just be a little bit harder on the system. When I was in Italy, I did everything the opposite of what my diet says I should. And I had all the dairy, I had so much red meat, definitely had a lot of alcohol, and I was perfectly fine. And I had no symptoms whatsoever. And it's not because I don't have like an allergy per se to these things, but my understanding is that the metaphor that's used that was used when it was explained to me is that stress is the factor that sort of pours gasoline everywhere, and that the triggers sometimes are the dairy. It might be the alcohol, but if the stress is there, then it's going to cause a big fire. If the stress isn't there, you might be able to get away with it. Is that sort of like along the lines, or at least one component?
Absolutely. I agree with that. I think, especially here in North America, stress is really a silent killer, and it's probably the number one killer. People don't realize how much it affects every single system in your body. It's really an ecosystem, as in stress, or a domino effect. Once stress hits, every system in your body is affected. But on another note, I'd even contribute some of that, hey, I ate pizza when I was in Europe and didn't have any symptoms, also to the question of quality of food, right? So
Right.
if you're consuming that same meal in a different place, we want to ask ourselves, well, why? Why did I react to dairy when I was in US, Canada? But I didn't react to dairy when I was in Europe. And, I think a lot of that can be contributed to our quality of food here in North America, our standards and regulations in the food industry, which unfortunately are chaotic, and really there aren't any. And yeah, absolutely. The way that we mass produce dairy here versus Europe is very different.
Right.
Did
Um,
that
yeah,
at all?
that's definitely a factor. I do think. I mean, if I have Tim Hortons dairy, for example, I'm toast. It's over. You're like,
Yeah.
this is the grave error that you've made.
Yes.
Um,
You've resorted to Tim Hortons for your source of dairy.
I don't honestly. I made a resolution. I think a couple of years ago. No more Tim Hortons. I do get an old fashioned plain donut because if you want the healthiest unhealthy thing, old fashioned plain donut is the way to go.
I give you thumbs up for that because you want to know what? I'm such an advocate for us being human and owning it,
Mm,
right? Even within my field as a naturopathic doctor, people look up to me like, oh, you must be so healthy. Oh, you must like not have any gut issues or not have any skin issues or right.
yeah.
You have to be perfect. But it's this really odd like idea that we all have in our heads that if we're looking at someone who has experience in this field, they have to be an expert. They're extraordinary. They're perfect.
Right.
I'm human. I ate pizza this week. I paid for it later.
Yeah.
That's what we do. But
Yeah.
the ultimate goal is not to strive for perfection, but to strive to do better the next day. So, hey, you know what? Yeah, I had Tim Hortons this week. Yeah, I was definitely unorganized. Maybe I didn't plan my meals enough, um, or I was just craving it. Great,
Yeah.
good for you. Move on, right? To
Right.
dwell on it and to get upset and guilty, I think that adds to the stress comment. That stress impacts you so much more than if you were to just have the donut and enjoy it and be grateful for it and cherish every single bite and delicacy out of it and then wake up the next day and say, okay, great, we're going to move on. What can I do today to make today better than yesterday?
Right. Well, I mean that last 30 seconds is an excellent sound bite. That's perfect. I think that's great. I want to get into and talk a little bit more about how do you say it properly? Naturopathy.
There's so many
Naturopathy.
ways. People say like naturopathic, naturopathic,
Okay.
naturopathy, naturopathy.
Uh-huh.
Um, I
Yeah.
think there's different
How do
variations,
you
and
say
I'm
it?
open to all of them. I say naturopathic medicine or naturopathy.
Okay. So
Yeah,
tell the listeners and explain to me as well, because this is the great thing about this podcast is I get to ask questions that I'm curious about that hopefully other people are interested in too. Um, but how does naturopathy differ from homeopathy and then also from regular medicine as well?
beautiful. Okay. So the way I like to explain it is think of naturopathic medicine not as a specific modality, right? So not it's not like massage therapy. It's specific to just physical touch. But rather it's a very broad umbrella term that covers anything that is not conventional. So actually we're going to just rewind there and
Rewind. Cool.
we're going to start by just explaining what our current system of medicine is, right? So here in North America, we have something called conventional medicine. Conventional medicine or allopathic medicine, if we were to break apart that word allo and pathic, so allo means different and pathic would be disease. So different disease, meaning the treatments and the remedies and the way that we help people heal is different, allo, than the disease, pathy.
Okay.
An example, you have a headache. Your doctor says, hey, take Tylenol for the headache. You're not taking Tylenol because you have a Tylenol deficiency that's causing your headache. It just so happens to be that in the realm of science, we've studied that Tylenol blocks the pathway to pain and that can relieve the symptoms of your headache. So I'm going to try and kind of filter that a little bit more. So our current system of medicine uses different remedies to treat diseases with the goal of reducing symptom. So it's sort of like symptom relief.
Yeah.
And only by using a toolbox full of drugs, technology, and surgery. That is not a bad thing at all, but that is the only system that we use here in North America, and we deem it conventional. So anything that is not that, anything that is not conventional medicine, is deemed allopathic and is put into this sort of black box category. So naturopathic medicine is just sort of this very big umbrella term that covers anything that's different or alternative. So within this term, we study homeopathy, we study Chinese medicine, we study water as medicine, plant medicine, nutritional medicine, the list goes on and on. And one of the biggest differentiating factors of naturopathic medicine versus conventional is the philosophies. So our philosophies are, one, first, to do no harm. So that would involve using the least invasive therapies first. If you come to me with a headache, my first line of therapy is not going to be surgery, right? That's very invasive. But rather, let's go for the least invasive. Maybe we'll start with the diet, nutrition. Maybe we'll start with lifestyle. Are you sleeping? So really working our way up that pyramid, starting with the least invasive, okay, doing harm. In addition to that, we as naturopathic doctors trust that our bodies have this inherent and incredible ability to heal itself on a very small scale. If you were to, get a paper cut, those are the worst, by the way, and I wish that you never get that. But if you were,
yeah, we've been there.
Yeah, we've been there. We've all been there. If you were to get that over the course of the next few days, you're going to notice that cut's going to heal itself. Now, that's a very small example, but we as naturopaths believe that our bodies have that ability, but it has to be in the right environment, right?
Right.
So if there's any obstacles for you to heal, as naturopaths, our job is to remove those obstacles, to allow for that incredible ability to heal yourselves. Right. So these are some of the many philosophies that naturopathic doctors follow. Another one is that doctor is teacher primarily. In order to get a really positive therapeutic relationship to instill change in your patients, you have to be able to educate your patients on why they're doing that, what they're doing, provide education about their body. That's so important. So combining these philosophies, sort of naturopathic medicine is just this giant big umbrella term that covers anything in those philosophies. So that does no harm, least invasive, trust that the body can heal itself. And then unfortunately, it's just anything that's not conventional falls under that category.
So naturopathic doctor, to me, and that was a brilliant explanation, and it's super clear. A naturopathic doctor seems to be like, the parent, the third parent, or the extra parent that we all needed to have to learn more about our bodies. Because it sounds like a lot of this is like, okay, well, this is like the modus operandi of how you should be, right? You need to learn about this. You need to learn how to eat. You need to learn how to sleep. You need to learn how to breathe. You need to learn what to take, et cetera, et cetera. But what happens when it's too late? What happens when someone's coming in, they're in full flare up, maybe it's some autoimmune thing, whatever it might be, and it's manifested through years of neglect, or maybe they're totally fine too, and maybe they thought everything was under control. Could have either of those scenarios and everyone in the middle. What happens then to that philosophy? Because it sounds like, hold on a second, we don't necessarily have the luxury of time to now, eat better and sleep better. It's too late for that for the time being. What happens when the stuff hits the fan?
I like how you said stuff. That was very polite of you. I was expecting the other word.
I mean, honestly, I could just say shit hits the fan. It's my podcast. It's my podcast.
And I'm so happy you brought that up, because that sort of allows me to talk a little bit about, both systems of medicine. I want to be clear, I'm not demonizing conventional medicine. I'm not demonizing surgery, pharmaceutical drugs, any of the above. In a perfect system, we would have both. I think in our world today, we're very reductionist, right? So it's one or the other. Meat is bad for you. Let's go all the way to vegan, right? So we seem to have a little bit of trouble with balance, and I could relate, right? I mean, we all could relate. Sure. Tim Hortons of the day, pizza, we're human, right?
That's right. And I mean, just given the the culture, like you said, everything is one of the, whether it's politics or, it's a Facebook post or whatever it might be, you can't take an in the middle position on just about anything, right? That's not for online. That's for offline, maybe with your friends.
So true. You're absolutely correct about that. And that same thing follows in medicine, right? So in an ideal world, we would have both systems of medicine where the reality is you're so far in your disease and your chronic illness, or you're having an acute flare. Perhaps you do need Western medicine in that moment. But that doesn't negate the fact that naturopathic medicine can't help you heal moving forward, right? There's still, so back to that note, in that ideal world, we would be focusing on prevention. That's, I think, where if
Okay.
we were to fit into the healthcare system in some way, I think we would excel at being preventative medicine. And then we have the allopathic doctors, the conventional doctors who were, when shit hits the fan, we need XYZ, great. Then we go back to the naturopath and we work with them for that preventative reason.
So if someone comes to you, with that more severe example, okay, you're giving them, maybe some sort of naturopathic prescription, if you will, for, okay, do this, do that, but also go hit up like a GI and get that sorted out. Is that sort of what's happening?
A little bit. Like,
Okay.
so I'll give you an example. So that would be the ideal circumstance, that we work as the preventative tool,
Okay.
but that's not reality. And
Okay.
at least I can only speak for my own clinical experience.
Yeah.
I actually didn't see a lot of prevention. I saw a lot of what you're talking about, which is people in the very late or end stages of their disease, chronic illness, frustrated with the medical system, and they come to a naturopath out of desperation. Well, I don't know what else to do. I have no answers. So here I am. What can you do for me? And there's actually so much work that we can do there. Speaking of doctor as educator, the education, the things that people could walk away with, knowing about their body, knowing about their disease, learning about their options. It's so rare that a medical doctor is able to spend a long amount of period with you, or, longer than 15 to 30 minutes. But if a patient could walk away with a little bit more education around what were their risk factors to getting to this point in their health, what can they do in the future to reduce those risk factors? What, beyond the acute medicine that we can give, right? So the herbs, the nutrition, the supplements that we can give in that moment to help support that flare or support that illness wherever they are in their health.
Right.
To me, I see so much value in the education portion. And of course, in that prevention, if you had a relapse now, or an event now, or your chronic illness shit hit the fan right now, it might happen again in a few years. How can we prevent that? How can we reduce that risk of it happening? So I see just as much value in both situations, because, a lot of the patients I saw were in that place. And the value that they were able to take away from, again, doctor as teacher learning, from realizing that simple things that they can do in their day-to-day can also lessen the intense decrease of quality of life or pain that they're in, or emotional distress. So I think both sides, there can be value in an ideal.
That's sort of interesting. So I'm doing some training, and my friend is a personal trainer, so he's been helping me out. And a lot of things that we're doing are things that I would never have thought to do. For example, types of stretches, different exercises that you don't see the big, heavy lifters at the gym go and do. Like, they're not the flashy exercises to go and do. Of course, we just want to get big and we want to grow muscles and all that stuff. But it's like, no. We're going to do this exercise on the calf, and then, the tibialis, and we're going to we're going to like hit up all these little random muscles, because
to me, I love it.
Yeah, it's like you're doing the physiotherapy before you get injured.
Yeah, exactly.
So that you don't get injured.
Exactly. No, you said it so perfectly. And something you said struck a chord with me, which was like, we're not doing those big lifts that would like otherwise get me muscles. We're doing all that accessory work, right? That sort of preventative work.
Right.
And that sort of comes back around to what I hear a lot of, which is, I'm sort of jumping into diets, for example, but
you don't like the word diets, right?
I hate the word diet.
Yeah, tell us why you hate diets, or the word diet.
Absolutely. I'm going to jump right into that.
Yeah, do that.
We live in a world where our conventional medicine has sort of set us up to believe that there is a magic pill for everything. any discomfort that you are experiencing, don't worry, we have a pill for that. And I think diet culture follows that same ideology, which is, oh, you're overweight, you need to lose weight. Don't worry, we have a new shiny diet for you. And that's what we tend to see if we look back in history. It's these same diets repackaged with shinier material this time, and now we all fall for it all over again, right? Ketogenic diet is the repurposed Atkins diet. And now we have the lectin-free diet, and we have the, vegan, and we have the specific carbohydrate diet. I could go on and on about all the different diets, but we have a tendency to fall and be mesmerized with something that's new and shiny, or right? When unfortunately, what's not hot and what's not sexy and what's not shiny is all that you're talking about, that accessory work, right? Is educating yourself about where food comes from, learning what foods are right for you, like, and as an individual. I think that's also a really, really big problem in today's world, which is we use these term diet and we assume that they're great for everyone. This new diet is going to help everyone lose the weight that they want to lose.
Right.
That's it. You just need, boom, you're done.
Right.
That is such a simple solution to a very complicated issue.
Yeah.
Beyond the fact that we're each individualized and that there's not one diet for everyone, we each have our own reasons for why we consume the foods that we consume, for why we are in the place of our current state of health that we're in. And I see more value in working with individuals and really getting to the root. Why are you eating those foods? Why do you crave those foods in the first place? Is it emotional? Is there emotional eating behind it? That's a big thing that a lot of people aren't addressing, but instead they're hopping on the ketogenic diet or the, lectin-free diet because it's hot and it's sexy and it's shiny and it's new and I can lose weight quickly.
Right.
But what about
Yeah.
what about the root?
So that could be like the, not just mindset necessarily, but there could be some, let's say we take emotional eating, for example. That is something that, I don't have I haven't done a lot of research on it, but my understanding is that it's something you have to work through, like mentally. Like you have to do mental, psychological exercises to get through that. But is that in conjunction with sort of a dietary prescription as well?
Yeah, so that's a great point. And I want to be clear. I don't like the word diet because I don't like the diet culture and this notion that I'm not eating good, so I have to now eat good. Or my body's not clean, I need to reset or detox. I think that they're very gimmicky and they get people to fall for them when there's a much deeper conversation that needs to happen. And anytime we want to change is one of the hardest things. Change your lifestyle, change your diet. It's not like you wake up the next morning and you're like, I'm gonna forget about all the pizza I ate for the last 12 years. I'll just make an egg this morning. It's not that easy, right? And so I think a lot of where change comes from education and self-awareness. Goes back to that conversation before. Our goal is not to be perfect, but our goal is to generate or to cultivate enough awareness that we can actually catch ourselves before we do some things, or at least be aware.
Wow.
Most things that we do are so unconscious, right? I'm mad, boom, in the fridge, get a tub of ice cream, right?
Yeah.
But if you're able to catch yourself at any point in that, wow, that's powerful, because that's where change comes from the cultivating the awareness. If you're not aware, you'll never change. And so absolutely, there's a huge mental, emotional, psychological, and spiritual component to change, and especially weight loss. And a lot of that gets ignored in the diet culture. It makes you believe that you just need, if you can just cut out carbs, your life will be perfect. Fuck no.
Right.
It's just, that's not the case at all. It's so much deeper than that. So, I encourage everyone to practice self-awareness, and that's hard. It's like, what does that mean? Meditation, what do I do?
Yeah, it sounds lame, but it works.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, being aware, I mean, a lot of people are aware as an afterthought. Like, I'm definitely aware after I've eaten something. I'm like, oh, it didn't make me feel great. What did I eat again?
But that's already huge and part of the process, right?
Right.
Because I'm assuming that a few years ago, maybe it could even be a decade ago, you didn't even have that after awareness. It
Well,
just was.
yeah, yeah, that's true. I think most people probably cultivate some, especially if they have IBS or IBD, they're going to definitely
Yes.
cultivate the after. But I think cultivating the before is a lot of what this is about, where it's saying, okay, consciously, what am I actually going to put into my body? Because this is the fuel. Like a lot of people talk about food as fuel, whatever. You know, they're going to quote some ancient Greek philosopher and talk about food is this and that, what like. But at the
Amen.
end of the day, what's the actual, what's happening in practice? And in
Yes.
practice, we always, what is it? We fall to our level of preparation and never we don't rise to our expectation. Whatever that quote is, I probably butchered it. But, you know, what is our preparation? Our preparation, at least for me, is years of just putting random stuff into my body. Even like doing a dirty bulk, for example, like in the wintertime, just do dirty bulking, just eat, the goal is to eat 3,000 calories. And it doesn't matter what, A&W, I'll hit it up multiple times per day. Oh, I need some extra calories. Oh, wait, let me get some extra fries with that.
Don't forget to make flurry while you're at it.
Yeah, yeah. And that's not, but people are doing that to a lesser degree with their own day-to-day lives. Oh, well, why do you eat that? Oh, well, I've always eaten that. Okay, great. Well,
Why?
yeah.
And exactly that. It's bringing up that why in all of us, right? On a very small scale, you could be in a very angry mood, right? You come home, you're just frustrated. Your roommate's asking you a question, your husband, your spouse, your partner, your family, whoever you're living with, and you're angry. And maybe before awareness, you're just going to act on it. Hey, no, don't tell me what to do. I'll be in my room. Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
But with awareness, you come home in that mood and you create time for yourself or space for yourself, and you ask yourself, why am I in this mood? But really, why? And come from it from a place of curiosity. It comes back to curiosity and not judgment. We don't want to judge ourselves. Oh my God, the world judges us enough. The least we could do is be nice to ourselves. But really ask yourself why. Oh, well, that person said this comment and it made me feel that way. Oh, that's why I'm in a bad mood. I'm feeling bad about. Okay. And just that awareness is so powerful. And it could perhaps prevent us from emotional eating. It could perhaps prevent us from lashing out on our spouse or partner or friend when we didn't mean to. It gives us the opportunity to understand ourselves a little bit better, hopefully bring in some compassion. Of course you're angry. This person said this to you. I would be angry too. Duh. Right? And then we
Yeah.
feel a little bit gentler with ourselves.
Yeah.
And that same thing is for food, right? Before you're about to reach, am I eating this because I'm hungry? Did I have protein before? No. Oh, so I'm hungry and sugar's the closest thing to me. Or oh no, I'm reaching for this because I'm pissed and this is what I always do to make myself feel better.
Right.
So it's that why, it's that awareness that's going to bring on change. And it's not going to bring on change tomorrow in 2 seconds. You're not going to wake up different. But again, that goal is ultimately to continue to cultivate it. You said something really interesting, which is, your food is fuel, and someone's gonna like quote this, funny. No, not you didn't say funny. You said something else about how like quoting that, your
Yeah.
body is like a vehicle and food is fuel.
Yeah.
I want to challenge that, and I want to say that no, your body's a garden, and so food is nourishment, and it could be or healing yourself is nourishment, and it could be in so many different forms. It could be the sun, right? It could be the microorganism flora of the soil.
Wow.
It can be the wind. It can be the rain, right? We are a garden, and our doctors should be looking at us like they are the gardeners, and they need to look at us and what in this environment needs help. How can I help nourish this?
Wow.
Not necessarily that, because food is fuel, and that mechanical view can work, but then that imposes that the doctor is the mechanic. And when do you go to your mechanic? When your car is broken. You don't go to your mechanic, just be like, oh, I'm in the mood to spend $500. You want to tune it up? Okay.
What a great metaphor. I've never heard that body as a garden. Yeah, that's really nice. That's really nice.
And I love it too, because again, goes back to that. We're so reductionist in our thought process. We're very narrow minded. So it's like, oh, this one thing contributes to your health. When no, we are just like a garden. We are like nature. It is this incredibly complex relationship with everything around us, right? We are influenced not just by food, but by our relationships with ourselves and others. We are greatly influenced by our lifestyle, the amount of sleep that we get or not, by our work, our purpose, right? I mean, there's so many things that make up our health. I love the garden analogy because it encompasses all of that and it makes it kind of fun, right?
Yeah.
It's we have to figure this out. What elements are contributing to your state of health?
Interesting. And so the least amount of artificial things that we could put into that garden, the better. Um, Interesting.
Yes.
And so we talk about, okay, we don't want to use these broad terms like diets and stuff like that. However, I wonder if you'll keep that stance with the idea of like whole foods and eating whole foods overtaking, you know, vitamins via, supplements and things like that. Is that something that you're going to, put a stick in the ground for and say, "Hey, you know what? This is for everyone. This is not an individual thing. Everyone should be having whole foods."
That's a great point. So I want to kind of talk a little bit about two things. First is, even though I'm not a fan of like the word diet and diet culture, I do view some of these diets as therapeutic tools. And much like a garden, sometimes we need to use some of these tools to help enrich the soil or to, de-weed, so to speak. And so it's not that these diets are bad, but the language around which they're sold and consumed in the general population, I'm not a big fan of. But clinically, I do use some of these diets as therapeutic tools. But the goal is not to have a patient or a client or anyone on these diets for the rest of their lives, right? The goal is not for them to walk away being like, oh, I can only eat 12 foods and I've been on this diet for 12 months. No, it's short term. It's a therapeutic tool to sort of get you into a different state of health. And then we get to introduce whole foods and a different way of living. And, that conversation of, well, are whole foods good for everyone? You don't like diets, etc. It's kind of it's like a yes and no answer. So I'll share with you my thought
Okay.
process. I think that everyone's diet is extremely individualized based on your ancestors, where you grew up, right? So there's that evolutionary aspect. I think it's based off of your current levels of stress, what you do for work, the foods that you have access to. So I think there's so many different levels to which, but in general, if we look at sort of that, if we scan and even in those different sort of environments, the different ancestors, you come from Eastern Europe, you come from Morocco, right? All these different landscapes, whole food still plays a huge role in all of these diets. So what does that mean, whole foods? It just means ask yourself, is this abundant from the earth? Did this grow from the earth? I think the big concept around whole foods is that we're really moving away from processed and packaged. That's the biggest no-no.
Okay.
And hopefully also you get to play a bigger role in that food chain. So currently, most people go to the grocery store, they get their food so disconnected from that process of where it came from and who's the farm and what did they use to grow it. Hopefully by moving towards more of a whole foods diet, you also get to invest locally. You get to buy from local farms, perhaps farmers markets. You get to ask the questions: where's this food coming from? What do you use to grow it? Do you use pesticides? You eat seasonal, you eat local. And how you do that specifically. Are you eating more of a Moroccan type diet, Eastern European type diet, South Asian type diet? That differentiates depending on every single person and their upbringing and where they came from. So, but the base of whole food should sprinkle in everyone, yes.
Interesting. Yeah, because I mean, I do see, like speaking of whole foods, you go into the Whole Foods, aisle with all the supplements and vitamins and everything, and I mean, you can get everything under the sun. It seems like you don't even need to have any real food anymore.
Yes.
You just pop like 20 pills in a day and you're good to go.
Wasn't there a product that someone created? I want to say in like the last 5 years. I think it was called Soylent. Do you remember
Yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah. I heard about that. And there's many derivatives and variations of that now.
Interesting. Okay, and that purpose was to sort of create a all-in-one nutritional shake that you never have to eat again.
Yeah, apparently it's desirable for for a certain segment of the population to eat and consume in the way in which someone with a very, severe medical condition would. And apparently that's cool. Like the only time I've ever had to eat, like those insures and whatever, that's like when you're in the hospital and your gut is messed up, you have those shakes that are like a meal in a shake, right? To me, when I look at that, I'm like, oh, great. So I can feel like I'm in the hospital again. But I don't know really what's super desirable about that. I mean, I get that maybe it's like efficient for people that they don't, maybe if they're like moving around all day, they can just, drink a Soylent and then they're good to go. But it doesn't seem that we're talking about what your ancestors were doing, or your ancestors definitely weren't doing that.
Definitely not. And you know what? It's such a good point what you're bringing up, right? I think as humans, we have a tendency to um, reduce or simplify what nature produces, right? Oh, I can do that and I can do it better. So let me try and make it, right?
Right.
I'll give you so many examples, but one that I really like is beta carotene, carotenoids.
Yeah.
Carotenoids is sort of like the fancy term for that orange pigment that's found in fruits and vegetables. So your red peppers, your carrots, they're really high in something called carotenoids, specifically one which is called beta carotene. So carotenoids are a family, and then you have like alpha, beta, and like so many of them living under that same umbrella. And research found, oh, wow, we found that people who consume diets with a lot of beta carotene in them had lower rates of lung cancer. That's fascinating. So, guess what we do as humans? We try and reenact nature. They said, okay, great, let's extract beta carotene, put it in a pill, let's give it to all smokers. It's going to reduce their risk of lung cancer. It's brilliant. What could go wrong? Everything went wrong. As a matter of fact, every single patient that they ended up giving beta carotene to had increased chance of lung cancer, not decreased.
Wow.
And then we want to say, well, why, right? And it comes down to, kind of what we were talking about with the garden, which is nature, health. It's such a complex orchestra of different participants playing a role. And so in the case of beta carotene, it's not just the beta carotene that's good for you, but rather it's the fiber, it's all the carotenoids, the entire family. You can't just isolate one. It's the enzymes, right? The enzymes are like the construction workers that are found in each fruit and vegetable. We have plenty of enzymes in ourselves. It's the phytochemicals, right? Those plant-based medicinal properties. So it's sort of this combination of everything that we owe its health benefits to, not beta carotene. And we learned that the hard way by supplementing so many people with that isolated product.
Right.
The reality is the whole is always better than the sum of its parts.
Interesting.
Right? And I say that because it comes back again to all these like diet fads and what to do and what's healthy, and gluten's not hot, but this is hot. And it's like, whoa, let's take a step back before we eliminate everything that's within our, agricultural cycle. Let's take a step back and say, how are you consuming it? Can you consume more of X or more of Y, right? Balance. The goal is not to run away to the other side and do the other extreme, but rather balance. And that same thing for whole foods. Time and time again, we see that. Vitamins that are made in a lab are absolutely not the same as vitamins made from nature. We have yet to isolate and emulate a vitamin that has the exact same effect that you would find in food. Now, it doesn't mean that vitamins and multivitamins are bad for you, but they shouldn't replace a whole foods diet. They should only, as the word says, supplement, right? You're supplementing, you're adding a little bit here, but not replace.
Yeah, my understanding is that certain vitamins are only activated in certain environments, meaning if there's minerals there or whatever, and so 100%. Forth.
And that's part of that really complicated web of vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, enzyme, fiber that we still have yet to understand. We don't really know what turns on what, which is needed for what, but we do know that when consumed in a whole food form, it does wonders. anytime we try to play around with it and extrapolate it and isolate it, we do see some issues.
Right. One question to follow up on that is to do with, you have a note on full fat items versus fat free whole foods items. So explain that a little bit more, because that's sort of confusing for me. I don't really get
Yeah,
like
tell me about that.
what's that?
What do you mean by confusing for you? Like just
Well, I get that there's food that's fatty. Like we're talking about like an avocado. Is that okay? And then what, like a fat-free thing would be what exactly? Just
okay,
like
great.
any regular fat-free food, or
I think I'm mostly referring to in this case. I guess it sort of stems back to all of the old diets from the past. So if we
okay,
look back, I mean, really, even the term diet didn't really appear in, research, scientific literature, mainstream media. We're talking like 60s, 70s, maybe. 70s was when things sort of really stepped up and took over. But there was this whole fat-free trend.
yes,
Fat is
okay,
bad. And that goes back to that extreme conversation, right? Fat is bad. Okay, great. Everything's going to be fat-free now.
I
It's
see.
like, oh, hold on, where's the middle? Where's the middle ground in all of this? Now, what tends to happen is, so, what we're really referring to is things that come whole fat in their natural form. Dairy. When you milk a cow and you get milk, it is not coming out skim milk. I can tell you that much. And
Right,
if it is,
right.
we have big issues, bigger issues than milk.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Skim milk cows on their way soon.
That's a problem.
Yeah,
But right, it's coming out in this whole food, whole fat
I
form.
understand.
And when we demonized fat, the answer in the nutritional world was to remove fat from everything. So yogurt started to come out with no fat. Milk started to be no fat. We didn't want butter with fat either. We wanted nothing with fat. But you have something that's in this perfectly beautiful, synchronized way and whole form, the way God intended it to be. And we're now removing a big component of it. We're removing the fat. What do you think is going to happen to that whole form thing? It's going to kind of change its shape and change its way, right? So we
Right.
now need to replace that fat with something so that it can still be in this whole form. Well, we ended up replacing it with a lot of fillers, with sugars, with refined sugars, with corn syrups, with additives. And that has had horrible implications in people's health as
What
a
a
result.
scam.
What a scam. So, and we all fall for it. I mean, I even have the education that I have. You know how many times I get to the grocery store and I come back home and I'm like, oh shit, I fell for that. I fell for marketing. This has skim milk in it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I hate that, and I also, you look, for me, even like I took soda pop out of my diet a long time ago because I said there's no way any of these are healthy. I don't care if it says diet in front of it. If it says diet in front of it, it's probably more unhealthy. Because I'd rather have the real weird sugar than, or the real sugar rather than the weird sugar. Um, we have more experience with the real sugar. But anyways, that's just me. But I think, if there is any form of compensation for marketing purposes, it's not going to benefit the end user. It's just going to benefit the company, right? They're like, zero sugar, that's a marketing play. That's not meant for me, right?
Always. And the thing also is we have to keep in mind, it's like we tend to feel guilty for being on our phones too much, right? Well, I don't have enough willpower to not be on my phone. Guess what? There's a whole machine that's working against you, trying to overcome your willpower and make sure that you stay, like those gaming mechanics, to make sure that you stay on my product as long as possible.
Right.
So we have to remove the guilt from that, because that's not, whoa, we are simple evolutionary creatures. We do not yet have the ability to override that system. Same thing goes for all of these, I'll call it green marketing, right? All of these really good marketing tactics that are used in the nutritional world. Um, we're made to sort of be like, oh, great, this is healthy, I'll consume it, but not to feel bad when we fall for it. They're doing their job and they're pretty darn good at their job
Yeah.
for getting very interested in that product in the first place. And these sort of marketing companies, the advertising that they use it's I have to say it's brilliant, right? They'll use things like redundant claims. That's one of my favorites.
What's
So
that?
so you'll have a coconut water, right? And on the coconut water, it'll say gluten-free and vegan. It's a redundant claim. Well, yeah, coconut water. I mean, gluten only
Oh,
comes
I
from
see.
wheat.
I see.
pretty sure coconuts don't have wheat, and
Right.
vegan, like I don't think coconuts are animals, so this should be good, right? But for most people who know that, they're going to walk by and be like, yeah, of course it is. But some people just don't know that, and they get fooled by those redundant claims. You think it's healthier because my coconut water is
Yeah.
gluten-free and
Yeah.
vegan.
It's like those it's like a gluten-free vegan carbonated water beverage.
Honestly, we're laughing now. I bet you there's a product out there on the market
Oh,
that is a
100%.
beverage
Uh,
that says these things.
yeah, yeah, 100%. We are pushing the time a little bit, which is great. But I can't go over too much because I don't think I have the room on the memory card here. So I want to
Okay.
ask you a couple more questions before we wrap up. And I just want everyone to know, because you always highlight. By the way, y'all need to check out Dr. Alyssa's Instagram account. What's the exact Instagram name?
It's Dr. Alyssa Kirby. So it's Dralyssa Kirby, Kirby.
Yeah, everyone needs to check it out because her reels are awesome. Her Instagram page is amazing, and it's just getting better and better. But she highlights certain ingredients and stuff sometimes, like beets, vanilla, gooseberry. Can you recommend a few things we should be looking for, and maybe some things if you have any risk, like foods that have maybe some risk to them that we should stay away from?
Yeah, that's a great idea. I like to highlight random foods that often get underplayed, or we just don't really know that there's a medicinal benefit to it. But the reality is that, and when I refer to foods, I'm really referring to foods that are abundant from the earth, right? That grow from the earth. They are all so medicinal. And one actually group that I think gets often ignored are spices and herbs, right?
Okay.
For most of us, we're like, oh, yeah, I could skip out on the spices. I'll have it simple tonight. But guess what? Those spices have incredible medicinal benefits. Things like cinnamon, clove, allspice, rosemary, thyme, oregano. Back in the day, before technology, before we had refrigerators and the ability to store meats for longer periods of time, we relied heavily on the medicinal property of spices and herbs to help preserve our meats.
Right.
Rosemary, parsley, oregano, thyme, all of these have antimicrobial properties, meaning that they have the ability to fend off bacteria and viruses. And so by applying them all over our meats back in the day, we were able to preserve the length of that food for a little bit longer. And, today we kind of don't use as much spices and herbs in our foods. I'm not talking for everyone. I'm sure there's plenty of people out there who do spice their food properly. But just that it has this incredible medicinal property, and not to forget it. So if you're looking at your meal and you're like, ugh, how can I elevate this? Like, how can I make it a little bit more nourishing? Spice it up, herb it up, chop up fresh herbs, chop up, crunch up some spices, cardamom, coriander, fennel, the list goes on. It's just so good for you, and the more the merrier, and they each have their own different benefits.
There's something very powerful about spices for sure. When they go in your food, you're like, there's something good about this. I don't know what it is, but it's like an intuition.
Always, absolutely, you said it perfectly. And we can get even biblical, like looking back thousands of years ago. This was documented. They knew that spices and herbs had value to them. There was oils that were used with some herbs and spices that were
Right.
very holy. We knew medicine existed through the use of these herbs and spices. So for as long as we could possibly remember, they are beneficial. We just have a tendency to forget about them a little bit these days. And this is me sprinkling in a reminder to use those spices, use those herbs, dress up your salads with extra herbs. That's
Right.
medicinal.
Right. Fair. Okay, final question. And because this is the Across the Dietary Universe podcast, we'd like to talk about the future a little bit too. And so my question is this, okay? And just indulge me in it. The idea of having like a pill, or let's say the Soylent, that has everything in it and then you're good to go. We know that we're not there yet. There's a long way to go before we get there. But do you believe that perhaps with the technology, we might be in a situation where, hey, it's just easier to feed, however many billion, if it's going to be 10 billion people in the world, it's just easier to package it up either in some pill format or some protein shake that you take, and then you're good to go? Or the alternative is to say, well, no, humans are not going to evolve to that, or it'll take considerably longer than we can ever imagine to get to that point?
It's a great question. I have so many thoughts brewing in my mind about that. Hopefully we don't end up there. However, I very much so do see us ending up there. Back to our conversation of extremes. Meat is bad. Okay, let's all go vegan, right? We tend to have this extreme. Oh, the way that we mass produce food is bad. We cannot keep up with our population. Boom, let's go to the other extreme, which is sort of encapsulating everything, putting everything into a supplement, making our nutrition available to everyone. I wish it won't go there. If I can dip into what my future would look like, it would look like every single person playing a role in their community and learning more about their food. People actively seeking farms, right? It takes a lot, and you go a lot out of your way to access, that local, quality grown food. But my future would look like smaller and smaller farmers markets popping up everywhere, people playing such a more active role in that small food command chain, learning about your farmers practices, learning where your meat comes from, having a little bit more respect and understanding for where that animal has been and where it's come from. So my dream for the future is that we come to a little bit more place of balance where we realize, hey, mass farming, mass producing, it's not the answer. But really beautiful, quality, small local farms, everyone playing a role in their community, learning more about where your food comes from, having that awareness of where it comes from also allows us to have a little bit of gratitude towards any time that we eat that food.
Right.
That would be my dream.
Wow.
I
Well, it's a
hope
very wholesome. Yeah, it's a very, very wholesome, and I would like to think that that's going to be the future. I think my vision's a little. It's a little depressing, I think, if we're all going to be taking pills and Soylents. So let's hope for more farms and farmers markets and localized situations and understanding and all that good stuff. Well, Alyssa, it was a pleasure having you on this podcast. Probably the first of many appearances here. I feel we could keep talking. This is already our longest podcast ever. So congrats on breaking the record.
Amazing. 10th anniversary of your podcast. For the longest one, I'm honored. Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun. Much like you, I agree. I could have gone on and on and on, but you did a great job at condensing it, keeping it very good.
Cool. Well, thanks so much, Alyssa. And we'll have the links to Alyssa's Instagram and so on in the description. So we'll see you on the next one.
Amazing. Thank you, Tamir.